Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest round of Iron Quest. This round I'm joined by Lindsay Betzendahl. Hi Lindsay.
Hey Sarah, how's it going?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. So I'm very excited to partner with you this month for Iron Quest and
Yeah,
joining some healthcare data, which is exciting.
it's really exciting. I love doing the collaborations. I did the one with the Sports with Sunday guys last year,
That's
and then
right.
that went really well, and this one has been great. So, I mean, this one, we've actually had 30 submissions.
Which is, yeah, I was actually blown away by that. Sports viz I might have expected, but I knew
Yeah,
that talking to you about doing a healthcare one was going to be tough to find a topic that wasn't just super general, but that would still be interesting enough that folks would find the topic worthwhile to invest some of their time in participating. So
yeah, absolutely. And so 30 submissions makes this the second most popular on
woohoo!
par with sports. So people
Healthcare.
clearly like healthcare as much as they do sports. But yeah, so I mean, I didn't know much about this topic before we started. I know obviously you suggested it, and it's actually been really interesting for me. And I think a lot of the visits cover different topics. So we've had like things like women in prisons, overcrowding,
Yeah.
mental health. And I mean, obviously mental health was the data set you provided, but I think only less than half of people actually
Yeah.
focused on that one. They actually went and sourced their own data, which is really
Yep.
great.
I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, and there's just so much to this topic. It's crazy.
Yeah. And to be honest, I didn't, when we talked about it back and forth and kind of thinking of ideas, um, it's not necessarily something I was familiar with either, nor did I really know if there was going to be a lot that folks would be interested in regarding healthcare in prison, but I kind of stumbled upon it and I was like, I think there's so many angles about it. And
Mm.
one of the things for me for Project Health is really bring awareness to particular issues. And because I didn't know so much about this, I imagined others didn't either. And so part of it is, looking for that information if it's out there and bring to light something that people just didn't know about because it's not being talked about. So I thought that was great that people took on so many different angles. There was so much information that I learned about, and that was, just really nice to see.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, so we've got 25 visits to review today, which is quite a lot.
Whew, all right.
So we better get started. But just when we're doing the feedback, just if you're listening, we're going to try and obviously get Lindsay's insight into the healthcare world, but also try and focus the feedback around the IronVis criteria of design, storytelling, and analysis, and just think about where we could improve the visits based on those criteria. Okay, let's start off. So the first viz we're going to look at is by Amandeep. And this one's looking at HIV in prisons.
Yeah, so I actually remember seeing Amandeep's original one, which, if you recall, Sarah, that had some bar charts that were reversed at the top, kind of floating down,
Yeah,
circles on it and stuff. So he had already done a little bit of iteration when we had seen that originally, and so he chose to put in this area chart instead.
Yes, I remember that because I actually spoke to him on Twitter and said
Yes.
about that and maybe to think about doing something different. So yeah, that top bit's been edited. I mean, for me, I would be curious to know how the numbers compare to the overall population, because
Right.
I mean, in here it's all the numbers focus on the rate of HIV for prisoners, but how does that compare to the people that aren't in prison?
Right. It's interesting. He has some rates below in the circles, but that's not what he's charting up above.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're right. It's overall volume and not necessarily the rate, which I'd like to see. It'd be nice to even, have a opportunity to see both of them. I know a lot of folks like to show both the rates and then the raw values because, depending on your perspective or what you're interested in, like raw number of people or just is the overall trend going up or down, you
Yeah.
could do that as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, so I mean, it's a great use of color. I think consistently throughout, it's just red and white, which is good. I was a little bit confused about these bar charts over here.
Yeah, I
So
think it's overall volume for years, but there's no label on the year part to really tell you what it is.
yeah, and then I think you can use this to filter, but I tried earlier, and it's working now. It just froze on me, maybe my computer. I mean, on the maps, what are you feeling about the squares?
Yeah, so I don't mind the squares. He originally had circles.
Okay.
I would tighten them up a little bit. Obviously, the gaps, the spacing's a little different from the vertical to the horizontal row. The rows and columns. So
Yeah.
I would just tighten it up a bit. The analysis question I had is just looking at this. It almost looks like it's the 100% is all the states.
Yeah.
And I'm only guessing that because of the states that are really large are Florida, New York, and Texas, which have large, more prisons and what have you. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't really tell. I'm totally guessing, but when I look at the values, when you look over Texas, it's like 1227, and Florida is 15, and New York is 1220. So it looks like they're actually the same numbers too. So it's not a percent of the state; it's a percent of the total.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a little confusing, only because when you select each year, it's probably going to be the same because they have the largest number of prisons or volume. So I
Yeah.
would rather have seen it as a rate for each state.
Yeah.
That would
No,
be insightful if that were something in the data.
I agree, because otherwise, I mean, we're just getting the same kind of same trends
Population.
every year, and then it's going to be relative to the number of people that are in those prisons in those states,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, I agree. I like the interactivity. I must say that I like how you can hover over a state and it will highlight that state. I think that's quite nice. But what I would like is for those to be listed in alphabetical order. So these circles, because I think they're listed in
Highest to lowest. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, I could go either way on that. To be honest, he might have had it alphabetically first.
Mm,
But I think I may have suggested this, is that I think that because you already had a map, I didn't need it in alphabetical order because I knew where the states were on a map. So I could just
okay.
find New York. I didn't need to look for N in, a list. And so I think it was more of being able to see that ranking where you couldn't really see it as well in the map when things got very close to each other, I suppose.
Yeah,
Uh,
you've got a lot
I could go
around.
either way on it. It kind of,
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you've got, apart from the four that stand out, you've got a lot, well, pretty
right.
much everything is around 3 to 4.
0 to 3.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's, yeah, fair enough. Any other feedback you have?
The only other thing is kind of at the top where we have this area chart that's taking up a lot of ink, and same with the title. So I get, I end up, it's this weird foreground, background gestalt type principle where that little white space suddenly kind of can pop out. And it's and the colors aren't exactly the same too. I don't know if the area chart has a bit of fading in it, or
Yeah,
opacity. So, I just think we get this strange line and this gap. So I would actually go for, if you're going to keep the area chart, I think that's fine to keep that filled. You kind of get that sense of volume. You get an emotional feel of that's a lot of people. I might just then change the title to have the title font red and just scrap that background color and just leave it white. And I think that would give you kind of a better intro into the viz, and then everything else is heavier. I think we
yeah.
just break it up a little bit.
I mean, he could invert the header, right? So we could have
That's
red.
what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, that would look really good, I think. I would probably just get rid of this black box around the annotation.
Yep. I totally agree
It's
there.
just demanding attention. I think it's not really necessary. Yeah, I like it. I was thinking maybe something could be done to actually visualize the numbers that are listed in the middle. So he's talking about the different dates and how things were on that date, with the top years. Maybe a sparkline or something to show the trends for each would be a nice inclusion.
Yeah, definitely. If you had it, because on the right you see that big drop from 94 to 2015, says 96 per 100,000 to 3. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
So I mean, that would be interesting to see that dramatic drop.
Yeah.
Especially as it relates to his overall title about is this getting better?
Yeah. So is it getting better?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not really immediately obvious. I think yes, there's less people
Right
overall that have HIV in prison, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's getting better. I mean, it's very much it's very much dependent on the the people that are getting admitted to prison, how many people are in prison.
Yeah, I was going to say another thing related to healthcare that would be helpful. I think someone else may have put this in their viz too, is then comparing it to the overall general population, because I do believe that the rate of prisoners with HIV is much higher than the general population. So just having that as context would be helpful too. It's not that you have to have all the data for that, but even if one number for 1 year would give you some perspective of, is this much higher then? Because then you can say, wow, the people who are in prison have this higher rate of HIV. Therefore, like, this is why healthcare in prison is challenging. Like, are they getting the right care they need? Like, right, then more questions come up about, what are we doing about it? And so I think I would add that if even if you could just grab some kind of comparison.
Yeah.
So otherwise,
Agreed.
I think it's like a great, I think this was his first one, Iron Quest submission. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Amandeep.
Cool.
Okay, next up we have Amy Wu. So Amy is looking at babies in prison. So it's a similar topic to what you did, right?
Yeah. There's a couple that had related to mothers and stuff. So
yeah.
And we got actually a number of folks did the plum pudding, so that was kind of cool. I think it's a good
me
use
included.
Yeah, me too.
my first one.
Right.
Finally got to use it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's effective here, right? Like,
it is. I really love them. I think so I think, well, first of all, I'd say there's lots of white space, which is great. Like,
I like that. Yeah,
it's got this biz has got loads of room to breathe. I really like
I love that.
the timeline. I just think it's really nice. The annotations are and just like pop out. It's really cool. And then if you hover over any of these, Amy's included a load more detail.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
those are fantastic. That is, so the thing is, we're talking about this bottom part of the viz, and I question, now looking at it, like, do we put, would that be more effective, like, up top? Like, is that, I know we're starting with the 4%, but maybe I guess it flows right. It's just I really like it,
and it's tucked to the bottom.
Have as much space, and I don't know. It's so fantastic, because I put some of this information in my viz too, and I was blown away by, one, how few states have like a prison nursery where you can keep your child there, and two, like, there used to be a lot more of them even before 1900, and New York's the only one that's like been long running, and everything else has come in more recent years. Like, most of them are only in the last 20 years when prisons have realized we need to change like how we're dealing with mothers and parents in prison. So it's a really and I do like how she did it. So there's a lot of good information. So I just question, like, would it, I know it's the order that she has, but
I know what you mean.
I don't want to miss it,
But it's great. Like, it is crazy. Like 79 years between New York and California. It's just,
I know,
mad. I agree. But I think at the same time, like you said, that it kind of flows, and that's like the conclusion that, in some sorts. So what did I?
So the other things I would just say is, I like that she has this here. It kind of feels like almost like a handcuff, but also circles represent like the womb. Like, I think there's some subliminal things that are going on that's pretty effective with how this visual is. So it's interesting. I question the color that pink doesn't quite pop as much as I would like. And I wonder if you ran it through an accessibility thing, like, is it as, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if everyone can see it so well. It just it feels a little brighter would be helpful. Maybe.
Yeah, it kind of hurts my eyes a little bit on I like the background color. I think that's great, but it's just not quite right against that
contrast
background. Another thing I noticed was different fonts. So like, if you look at the two circles, they're kind of slightly different colors and maybe even sizes as well. The one on the left is kind of gray, and I thought maybe it would be nice to make that 2.6 years more of a band, so make it a bit bigger.
Yeah, I agree.
And bring it to the top maybe, just to make it pop a bit more.
And same with that 4%. And I would, I almost might switch those two circles around and start with your 4%, since that's what the inner chart is the 4 women, that 4%.
Uh-huh.
Because otherwise you're looking at the 2.6 and looking at the chart and saying, I'm not sure how 2.6 works. And then you get to 4 because you're reading left to right. So I would switch them. And then I think the 2.6 years kind of speaks to then why, if you're pregnant when you get in, you're likely to have your baby while you're in prison, because if you're going to be there for 2 years, you're going to have that kid in 9 months or less. So I think it would work to have them switched around.
Yeah, no, agreed. And then we've got the sippy cups.
Yeah.
So what you call them in the US?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we call them that here too. It feels very American to me to say sippy cup. But yeah, I think they're cool. When I looked at this, first of all, I just glanced at it and I couldn't figure out like what they were. It was only once I went in, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I've got it now.
So I'll admit, I actually didn't quite, they look like sippy cups, but a bottle would have been more obvious. And to be honest, it kind of looks like a beer with a straw or something. Like, I don't know, like the handle was it just looks so much like a mug.
A German beer, like, the big ones.
But I mean, in context, I get it, but it took me a minute. So
yeah, I guess a traditional like baby's bottle.
Yeah,
might be like more obvious, but I do like how she's like split them out again, like and put them in those objects.
Yep,
that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Awesome.
Next one is Anne. So I got to meet Anne when I went to Cincinnati.
Oh yeah, that's right. I did hear that.
She's amazing. Yeah, and I presented on this, so as a result, she went and entered for the first time, which is great. So thank you.
Oh,
Anne.
Cool. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So similar topic to Amy. So
yeah.
Do you know her? All right.
So Anne used to work with Health Data Viz, where I work.
And okay.
So she our books, and she's been doing like every single Project Health Viz since I started. And
oh, that's awesome.
So I see her at the conference because she stops by and sees our company's booth and stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
She's great, and
she is
in healthcare and dedicated to improving her Tableau skills, which she certainly has done so much in the last year. Yeah.
So Anne's Viz looks at the impact of like women being incarcerated on their families, and the impact on the children, which it's kind of something that I touched on as well, which is quite shocking, really. I didn't know before I started this that there was a difference, that you had different prisons in the US, because over here we have it's pretty much just prisons. Most of them are state run, and there's a few private, but they're like outsourced by the government. But in the US it's completely different, right? You have like jails, and then like state and federal prisons, like she's broken down in the chart at the top. Yeah, and that kind of confused me at the beginning when I was like,
jails, federal, state, yep. Yeah, no, and this, I mean, typically, so I think she did fine with a stack bar chart. I would never go over like 3, dimensional fields within it. But so I think this is effective when she's showing like that overall, because her big band at the top left does say, just a 700% increase overall. So I think if that's the title and the main point of it, then this works really well to show that.
Yeah,
really
I'd say with
the other elements.
Yeah, I mean, with the exception of the federal prisons, which is quite small, the other two look like a similar size. So, and we can tell it's of the trends going up massively over time.
Exactly. So it works. And then let's see.
I liked how she's got like the font at the top, which is like on theme, and then the barbed wire kind of separate it. I thought that was like a really nice like addition.
That was clever.
Yeah. On the dot plot, she's done this caller action, so you can select a state, and then I think it's she might have got inspiration from the Big Book of Dashboards, because there's a viz in there by Steve Rexler where he does this for conference speaker feedback. I think it was like an old like TC like data set, and you can select your like number, and it does the same thing. So I think that's really cool. What would be nice would be like a parameter action. I thought maybe just to click on a state and then that highlight the state in the same way. Yeah, it looks like. But I mean, that's just a minor thing. I gave her some feedback because I spoke to Anne about this before, and what confused me was what this chart was showing. Like, so I'm not familiar with the grade scale or what that means. Like, is an A to F, like, is A good or is F good?
That's a good point. I'm not familiar with it either.
So she added this in as an after we spoke, which is great, which explains it. But I still think it takes a little bit to kind of understand what the chart's showing, and also what these categories mean along the top.
Right. It still doesn't tell you if like a 4 is a good or bad. So you're assuming that, I mean, A is good and 4 means good because that's how we do standard grades in like for academics. So I'm
Yeah.
totally guessing that makes sense.
So
Therefore the higher score is better, but it doesn't
I think that's the case, but it's not 100% like clear. I agree.
Yeah, and it looks like, from what I can tell, I'm guessing there's some jittering going on that's supposed to be like spreading these out, but it doesn't look, I mean, I know it's random, so therefore it's not going to look necessarily consistent, and you only have the scale up and down is, you know, you only have so many values that it can be, so it ends up looking like these lines.
Yeah.
There is a way to get that center, that circle to be in the center, which I'd like to see. I mean, anytime you select a state, it'd be great if it were like centered and not like kind of more randomly. It looks like it might always be to the far left because of the way the random function works. It's always going to pick the value. I've done it before where you can get it in the center. That might be just helpful to kind of line your eye up and see the one that you've selected. I like the technique of getting the one that you've selected bigger with the label on it. I think that's really effective.
Yeah, and then I like how she's included context throughout. It's like it really does tell a great story. And then if we go down, this chart here is like really powerful, I thought, just to show the impact of like incarcerated parents on children. I wasn't immediately, I admittedly, I looked at this in the wrong order because I'm like looking at this thinking like, what's ACE? But she does describe what ACE is over here, and that's completely my fault. But one thing I thought was that it just seems a little bit cramped down here. So everything else is spaced out quite nicely, but it seems like the last bit where the message is a bit squashed, and then you've got the kind of like the resources and stuff. So if it was me, I'd just give that a little bit more breathing room at the bottom.
Yep. Yeah.
And then just with the color, orange can mean more than one thing. So orange here means incarcerated parents, and then up here it means state prisons. So just and then here it's everything, I think. So yeah, it's just be careful with the use of color.
Well, you know, I wonder though, the top that say state prisons, those circles may just, I mean, they're obviously just states. So that could be very well, the data is just for state prisons. I know when I did mine, the data for federal prisons was a lot more limited. Like there's a lot of research that's done on like state prisons and they'll give more information over. So that could be possible. It's not entirely clear, but obviously they're only states in the circles. So they may be state prisons. It could be the federal ones in the states. You know, it's something she should maybe consider. Just being clear on like what does the data entail? Is it all prisons in these bottom charts? Just state ones, you know? Yeah, that might help with the color thing.
Okay.
Cool. Very nice.
Cool. Okay. And next we have Artie. I think it was Artie's first time participating as well.
All right.
So she's looking at healthcare in captivity. So the first thing that stands out is this poem over here, and she's used this font type a couple of times in the viz. While it looks great, it's really hard to read.
You know what? It doesn't show up on mine. Now, it could be because, I don't know if you're on a PC, I'm on a Mac, and that font does not show up.
So it defaults to just what, like Times New Roman or
something like that. Like that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well,
so that's something to consider then, is obviously the fonts are not going to show up.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really surprised it's showing up on mine because this is definitely not a friendly public font. But hey.
Take it.
Yeah, so she uses it a couple of times. It's used on the color legends and then some of the filters as well. And yeah, it's just because it's very small and it's because it's quite like it's quite like elaborate. It's quite different and detailed. It's quite difficult to read. So that was like my initial feedback. And then the scroll. I'm not sure like how appropriate that is to the topic.
Right.
It made me think of like kind of pirates and
A little, yeah,
Yeah, so
antique or old versus, we're talking about obviously current healthcare, not
yeah, exactly, yeah.
healthcare long
Um,
ago, right?
yeah, so, and then over here I wasn't quite sure what this chart was showing initially because there's no title. So I think it's showing females as a percentage of the prison population. So
Yeah, it looks like the bar chart and the maps are showing the same information, are they? No, one's population. Okay, I gotcha. One's must be population and one's showing percent.
yeah, but then it's one of them says the female, so the bars are the female prisoner population percentage, and then the dots are the prison population rate, which I'm not quite sure what that means.
So yeah, I mean, it could be like, as we've seen the others, like, oftentimes rates are going to be rates per 100,000 or something.
Okay.
But it's not necessarily clear. Usually you want to spell that out if it is, because rates can be per 1,000, per 100,000, depending on like how small the actual numbers are. We
Yeah.
expand per part. So whatever it is, I would have just written that in or put it in a title. And
Yeah.
when I was looking through all of the vises, there was a theme. So I'm going to comment it on here, and then we can probably keep pointing out. There are a number where there aren't titles on the charts, and I'm a big advocate of making sure you have titles on charts. Even if you decide that you want to have axes titles, I think it's just really helpful to ground people into what they're then going to look at and how the analysis is going to unfold. Without it, we're talking here just trying to guess at what it is, and without hovering, we actually don't have any information. There's no labels, there's no axes. And so a title would at least give me enough information that I can see what is, highest to lowest, but we don't even have headers. So I would opt to add some of those things in for, so we can easily understand what we're looking at.
Agreed. I mean, there's a risk otherwise obviously there's more effort put on the user or the reader to try to interpret what's going on, but there's a risk that we're interpreting incorrectly.
Right.
And we think the chart's showing something that it's actually not. With these filters, so she's split out the countries into their shapes. Now, I'm not that I'm really bad at geography, but I can't identify all these countries just by their shape.
Right. I agree.
So, but we have got the highlights, so we can highlight, let's say, Africa, and it will highlight the countries. But then I'm still not. This doesn't include all countries. There's more than 5 countries in Africa.
Right.
And another thing that kind of threw me was if we select a continent, we can still select a country that's not in that continent in the second filter. So I'd expect it just to show like relevant values. So almost like filter out anything that's not in that continent. So that kind of confused me a little bit when I was working through this. And then back to what you said before, down here, we haven't got any titles or axes labels. So it's quite difficult to know what these charts show before you start like working with them.
Yeah, I think if we're talking from an analysis perspective, it makes it challenging to understand what analysis she's taking. There may be some really good things going on, but it would take me a long time to kind of tease apart what we're looking at and what's significant or not, and what should I pay attention to, without having those titles, axes, headers, things like that. So there might be something good here, but it's really tough to kind of look through it all and figure it out. The other thing is you talked about the poem at the top. There's a lot of competing visual aspects going on. So, from design, I understand why this poem is probably really wonderful if I spent the time to kind of read through it. Obviously the background image, we have an emotional image of kind of like the jail cells or what have you. The problem is we have too many things that don't necessarily fit really well together, like you said, the poem and the scroll, and then we have the image, and then we have all these graphs that have different colors in those images and different backgrounds. And so visually, I'm just they're all competing for my attention, and it's kind of hard to look at the whole visual in its totality in kind of a cohesive way.
Yeah, agreed. And then down here, so we've got these 4 charts. It's not clear, like, because at the top we're looking at it by country. It's not clear what country this data's for. So, I mean, there's no way I can filter this data for the country. And it doesn't say anywhere which country it's for. So I think, it needs to be a little bit clearer. And then also the colors confuse me a little bit. So we've got this chart is showing, well, I thought it was showing females, but I think it's showing each bar is an age, and then it's broken.
There's
No?
female and male in there too in total.
Oh yeah, okay.
So they're all demographic characteristics, and then we have the total. I actually think the issue is that these should not be stacked, because we're talking about percentages that aren't going to add up to 100. Because you have, what you're looking at is, a demographic, so females that are affected by a particular disease, so arthritis. And that same female who has arthritis may also have hypertension, right? So they're not going to add to 100, which is why these bars are percents, but they're all varying lengths. And so I just think it's the wrong chart type for what she's trying to show. Ideally, like some sort of small multiple would be nice with, you could look at each of the diseases and see how there's variations, that maybe one disease has a really high proportion of females but not males, or this age versus that age. So I think that might be a better approach, or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. All right, should we move on?
Yes.
The next one is Brian.
Oh boy.
It's huge vids with like amazing interactivity.
Yeah, there's a lot here.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty incredible. So if you haven't looked at this vids before, I highly recommend going in and just interacting with it. It's really, really good. It reminds me of what Hesham did for the IMViz.
Right.
It has that kind of vibe going on. But he's taking it to the extreme.
So I think this is a really good example of kind of a really nice IronViz type submission. And the first thing to say is it's not because it necessarily has, some complicated things going on in here, or that it's long form. Like, I just want to put that out there. You don't have to do long form vizzes, and they don't have to have all these complicated things. What I do think is really effective, though, is two particular things that I just want to point out, because I think it's really good for folks to be aware of. So first, he uses like 3 colors. And I think that vizzes who follow like the 60-30-10 rule, so he has like the black, the orange, and like white, and like some variations of those same colors with, some grays and some light peaches, but there's those 3 hues.
Yeah.
I think that really helps keep this viz all together, right? Like, you can tell it's one thing, it flows together. I can start to understand how these colors interplay.
Yeah.
And the second really important thing is this separation and flow of his story, right? So his analysis is buffered by color, and then these sections that help drive that analysis, where you have prison overcrowding and mental health screening, and then we get down to infection, right? Like, you flow down this story.
Yeah.
And so I think those 2 things really help anyone's analysis then shine, right? Because now I can understand what this is talking about. I have a story to follow, and now I can really appreciate the data that he's bringing to light. So I just want to say that, because I think it's a good it's a very
I agree. And I think with vizzes like this, there's a risk that when you like section off different sections, is a risk you could almost like kill the storytelling, basically, like and breaking them off and just stopping the flow. But with this one, you don't have that, because you've got this continuous.
Literally has flow.
It literally does. So it just like each section just blends into the other, although they are completely like separate, which is rare to see, really.
And well, they're not completely. At least he's got country is what's flowing between them, so you can follow one country.
Yeah, but I mean, he have got lines in between them, which is like separating them off from each other.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. But but despite that, it still flows incredibly well.
Fantastic.
And you've got, not only has he got the charts, but he's added in, like, he's got quotes, he's got different kind of interesting numbers, and call outs, and everything looks like it updates based on the country you've selected as well. which is just fantastic. And I like how he's included his bands in. They're not just he's not just got a number in a box. He's added
Right.
shapes, different colors, just to keep your attention. I think that really helps. And
Yeah, the only thing I would say, well, two, one, I really like the chart a little above where you're at right now. I've never really,
this one,
yeah,
yeah,
it was really, I don't know, it's really interesting to just see it's like an overall count, and it helps him flow through. You're right, he's got all these like sigmoid curves that help flow through, but it's really like bringing through these counts. But I found it really effective, and it was useful for the interactivity when you could just pick a country and then you could see where it fit along all of these different scales. Like Russia right now, and you can see that for mental health, it's available in more than half the prisons, right? It's only one of 3. And like, I don't know, it felt very unique, but effective. So that was pretty cool, viz I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, he's done a really good job of normalizing all the numbers as well.
That's excellent.
We touched on it before, but I think it works really well here. If I was to criticize it, it would be tiny criticism, would be just to show like what the scale of the chart is, like because that kind of threw me a little bit on some of them. So it's fine. I mean, the information's there when you hover. It kind of tells you, okay, with Russia, 1 out of 229 people were incarcerated versus, say, Italy, where there's obviously less.
Yeah. I will definitely say, I mean,
but then I think there's a risk if you would start including extra like ink on there that you're going to spoil the design. So it's just a balancing act, isn't it?
It totally is. I mean, the visit itself, I think, seems to be designed more. You do have to do a little bit of work. I mean, you can get a very good sense just from looking at bars are really effective, right? Obviously, of just showing more or less and kind of ranking things together. So I think that message gets across really well just with the bars. To get actual values, right, you definitely have to do a little bit of work to hover over things and make sure you know what you're looking at. So it's definitely not a viz you're going to look at in 2 minutes. And
no.
So
and another thing that's really great is he's included the resources here with like different things you can click through to actually look at, like away from the viz, which I thought was nice. Quite often we're inclined to like just throw everything in like a tooltip or something where you can just put all the resources in there, but it's actually split them all out, so you can go away and do further reading if you want to.
Yeah, in fact, the more information section is pretty large. I mean, it takes up just as much as the other sections. He gave it just as much space, which you're right, you don't see that as often. So
yeah,
I think kudos to that, to give it a little more room and information.
Yeah, well done, Brian. I dread to think how long that took.
Right.
Okay, so next up we have Claudia. I hope I've said that right. So this is looking at prison healthcare in the EU. So what stood out to me first of all was that this contrasting design.
Yep.
Which I thought was really nice, how it flips, like you've got chart, text, like flipping all the way down.
Yeah, and as I said to the others, I'm starting to be really a big fan of just the less colors. And so this is really great where she realized, you don't have to change up the chart colors necessarily. I mean, sometimes you may, if you're really looking at something different, but this seems effective in just having kind of one color throughout. I think each of these little boxes, it's interesting. See, your font looks different again than mine. That's not what it looks like on mine. But each of these little sections, so in mine, it's actually even harder to tell the little titles where it says prison overcrowding and healthcare site. Because I think you're right. I think it just defaults to Times New Roman.
Yeah.
I might just either make them all caps or just slightly bigger font. Like I want those headers to stand out. And because right now in mine, it's all the same font, I actually can't see it as well. So I was just noticing that. Because I want to know what I'm looking at to the right or to the left, and what I'm about to read.
I would say that the text that's directly below the title at the top is quite small, and I imagine she's done that just to fit it into that box. But another thing, that top section, the actual height of that blue section isn't the same as the others. So I'd be
Yeah.
inclined to just make that a bit bigger, and then you'd make that text bigger, and then it would fill the box quite nicely.
Yeah, and the one thing I did notice, so she's got the little map in the corner.
I saw this. So is it interactive or is it not?
I don't think it is. I don't think anything happened, so I would just float something over it, or it didn't look like it was.
I know. I did. I tried it before. I didn't do anything.
Yeah, but did you notice the little French English conversion? Click on that, and the whole thing goes.
Okay.
So it's
I missed that. I thought she just included that because she's from France, and I don't know.
So it switches languages, which I thought.
Oh, mine didn't.
Because you got to switch it. Try again.
Let's try again.
There
okay. Oh, that's really cool.
I've never seen that before.
No, we did this for a client, but I've never seen it on Tableau Public.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, look at that. I mean, maybe that should be a little more obvious. I happened to click on it being like, why is there a little flag there? But that's pretty clever.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, or maybe that's impacting them on like some of the text, because maybe some of the words are longer in French or shorter in English. I don't know. But yeah, okay. The one thing that confused me was this donut chart. Now,
same.
I don't think this is a kind of parts to whole kind of relationship, unless I've interpreted it incorrectly. But I'm pretty sure this is the wrong chart for this analysis. So
yeah,
I mean,
I think she's looking at the different countries, and then how many countries fit into who's responsible for the prison, right? Which authority, right? There's also a filter. Yeah,
so I think it goes back to the point we said before, I think, with the labeling of when we were looking at Artie's vids. I think some additional labels on here would be really helpful, and with donut charts you've got this whole section in the middle that you can utilize for that kind of thing, and explain what the chart's showing.
Yep. And I know she has, like I was saying, kind of the title to the left, but it still makes it hard to really directly understand then and carry that title over to the left chart or to the right chart, depending on which one we're looking at. So I'd still be more inclined to have a specific title, even if it's a little more detailed. So many.
Yeah. So she did on the chart above does. But the others
don't. Yeah. And I also don't think you should use a donut chart in general, and specifically not one that has this many slices. I mean, or a pie chart for that matter. Even if it's a part to whole, I think bar charts are super effective. You can just still rank them and really see that variation pretty clearly. And with this color scheme, it's a little challenging sometimes to see how many slices are even there as we get to some of those colors that are almost the same.
So similar, yeah.
So I would just have a bar chart and call it a day.
Yeah. And then on the plum pudding again, it wasn't immediately clear to me what the colors meant. So the blue means yes, it has this thing depending on what you've picked, Dave. But it took me a little while to figure that out.
Yes.
So again, it would be nice, I think, with the title to explain what this chart's showing.
Yeah, and to be honest, because you have this filter that has 5 different options, I would almost opt to just have them all out there, right? Because if you want to compare kind of ultimately what this is looking at, right, the percent of the countries that have whatever responsibility, that you've selected.
Yeah.
And if you can see them all, then I could see without having to click a filter which ones have a lot of countries and which ones don't, right? Right now, I can't do a lot of comparison between them. And one at a time doesn't give me a whole lot of context, right? I just can kind of tell if it's about half, is it more than half? So I don't know. I might want to you've got a lot of space. You might be able to put all 5 of them there and with a little title of what they are. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be quite nice as well if you wanted to looking at on a country by country basis, because right now I have to hover over them all to find out where's my country, right? Whereas if we had small multiple plum pudding still with a filter for country, you could instantly see how that country
a highlight for country or something.
Yeah. And then the other thing was the word cloud at the bottom. Now, so this is looking at the benefits of good prison health.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if these are sized by their level of importance or just for like aesthetic purposes.
Yeah, good point.
So I'd consider maybe just including these as a list, just like what like Brian did at the end, like just as like a little summary.
Yep. And we have a little misspelling of improving in the beginning. A couple of things, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but nice.
Okay. Yeah, nice. I do like the use of color here. It's really nice. Okay. Next up we have Daniel. So Daniel is looking at overcrowding in Irish prisons, which funny enough is pretty much the same story as the rest of the UK.
So I actually remember seeing this one, I think on Twitter, or maybe just on public, and immediately really liking it. Like, I think it was just like this gray background. Again, I think sometimes these simple colors are really effective.
Yeah.
Because I could really see his analysis really clearly. So I really liked how it was organized and some of the charts that he selected.
It's really clean. There's lots of like white space. It really stood out to me as well. Yep. It's just really nice. I would say that so we've got the charts here that show like overcrowding, which instantly you can see, yep, Limerick is overcrowded. Yep. For instance, the red here is like really powerful. But then if we go down, he mentions, so it looks like women's prisons have overcrowding issues. Now, I don't know from looking at this which prisons are women's and which ones are men's, unless other than looking at this kind of F&M, which isn't like immediately obvious. So if there was a falling out,
and I don't know, does that mean the other ones are all co-ed? Or is that what you're saying?
I think it probably means that they're men's. It's quite rare to get like co-ed prisons. I think in the UK there's about, I think there's one and the rest of them are just male or female. I think in fact I think these are co-ed. So they've got Limerick male, Limerick female.
Right. And so everything else is probably just male or
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, though that would be helpful to be clear, like maybe even in a subtitle to just say, Limerick and Mountjoy are the only two that have, separate women's prisons or something, to make it really obvious that the others are all male. Because otherwise, you're right, it's kind of hard to totally be sure.
Yeah, it just kind of threw me when I actually read it. It's like, okay, how do we know? And then, it went back up.
I would suggest, using like a Gestalt principle of enclosure. I might just put a very faint, like thin box around those two and, almost like annotate it and say, with just some little text, even there, and just separate them off and say, these are the two women's prisons. And like, you can obviously see the red anyway, but this would show like, but these are the women's prisons that are overcrowded, right?
That would work so well as well, because they're right next to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you would get away with the need of having an M or an F.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then down here we've got these Visin tooltips, which are great, but they're just really big, especially for the women, because you've got less prisons. There's only 2, whereas if you look at the men's, you've got all the prisons listed. So I think we're doing like a, what do you call it, like a fit entire view.
Yeah, you probably want to do a standard and then set them to be.
Yeah.
Do that. Yeah. Does it have a? Yeah. Wait. Can I see the bottom?
The bottom here.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I.
And then this kind of threw me. This jump in the bed capacity. So in like December 19, all of a sudden the bed capacity went up about, I'd say about 40 beds. So it'd be nice if he could annotate this point and explain why. Yeah.
Yeah. Did he? No, I guess it doesn't say anywhere. I didn't know if it said it somewhere.
I don't think it does.
Yeah, no, I don't.
I mean, that suggests to me maybe they did an extension, or they didn't open a new prison. But
yeah, that would be helpful just to know. And and I think the female male the bar chart right above, I mean, they're very thick.
They're very big. Yeah,
a whole lot of space. I would just thin them up. They don't even have to take up the same height as the line chart. I mean, they could be much thinner and not
Yeah.
as tall.
I mean,
As
you
a whole.
could even hover it over this kind of white like space down here.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh,
But no, overall, I think the story flows really well, and
Mhm.
each section again like kind of flows into the next one, which is really nice.
Yeah, and I like, his use of titles is, he's telling that story, right?
Yeah.
Red is overcrowded, percentage of beds occupied per prison. Like, it's clear. Looks like
Mm.
women's prisons have a significant overcrowding issue, right? We're just telling a sentence, and same with the last one. So he tells the story through his titles,
Yeah.
which I think is an effective way to, tell data stories in these kinds of, in Iron Quest and Iron Viz. So
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Next up, we've got Juliana. So she
Yeah, I
looked
remember
at
seeing
the
this one.
mental health. I think it's the data set you provided.
Yeah, I believe. Just loading. There it is. Yeah.
So this is, I mean, there's a lot of information in here. I do like the overall kind of design. Again, she's consistently using colors. Just those
Yeah,
three.
very consistent, right? We
Yeah.
just have those two, and they always mean the same thing. So
Yeah.
that's helpful. Like that.
I'm not sure how I feel about these charts. I don't know what you call them. I've seen them a couple of times recently, but I think here, I mean, just as a glance, kind of getting a feel for which one's the biggest, I think they're fine.
Right.
But if you want any precision, then this isn't the right chart to be using.
Correct.
Mm.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I have seen them a bit. I know people are put out tutorials on how to do some funky things, and that's totally fine. I think people use these mediums to practice.
Yeah.
But you're right. So from a, you also notice here, she has most of the details in the text in terms of the actual values, right? There's no axes here to tell me, or labels to say which one of these semicircles and what the value is. And so I don't really have perspective, but it's all written in there. So I think it works from at a glance, right? So and if that's the purpose, then it's effective. At a glance, I can see that those with no indication of a mental health problem, right? That's probably a lot more people, but more prisons.
No, I agree.
Or whatever, you can really.
If you were doing it, I was thinking about this. Would you take away the zero line? So the line in the middle, I think, is the zero line, because I don't think it's necessary. Because there's a clear cut between each circle.
I don't know. That's a good question. Normally in radio type stuff, I take away the zero lines, but I don't have a problem with it here, only because these two sides of the charts they're just so different. It's all, I feel like they're like two magnets that are stuck together on like, I don't know. And so they almost feel like they should be sticking on this line. Otherwise, I feel like this strange floating circle that's of different shapes that I'm not used to seeing. But so I don't mind it. It's pretty and faint, and it, to some degree, it keeps me oriented from like a small multiple trellis type perspective, right? Like I have some sense of boxes. I may have felt differently if the background wasn't black. I think because it's black, it helps ground me a little more.
And she's done really well with the dark background as well to make everything like readable.
The contrast is good.
Yeah. I would say that there's a lot of text and there's a lot of information like packed in here. I would consider just including a few, like calling out a few bands or like key numbers, just to break it up a little bit. That was the one thing that stood out for me. Like,
yeah, no, I agree. I think,
and it's a really minor point because I think it works well as it is, but it might just be nice just to bring out some of that detail.
Right. Because otherwise you got a couple paragraphs you're reading. Yep.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
I mean, the scatter plots. I think I like them. I do think that font is like, it is super light. That's one place where I think the contrast is exceptional
on the axes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I get probably why she did it. I think if it was white, it probably stands out too much, but I would probably crank it up just a little bit. That color's kind of hard to read.
And we do get 2 circles for each
right,
each thing, like race or because it's jails, prisons. I don't know that I don't think there's any interactive. Oh, there is interactivity. I think there was. Yeah, I think it's fine because she's got she's using the same color for the labels as the circles.
Yeah, I think it's fine
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
You know that you're looking at jail inmates versus prisoners, and I think that helps it be pretty clear that which has these higher rates of things or
Yeah,
whatever.
and especially down here, like you can see that there's a big split between the two.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
sure why particularly she called. I mean, I guess it's in her text because she's calling out the 65-year-olds. It looks like is the only one that's labeled, and so this is a place where I think to your point of maybe bans by even just making the title say that, like just have the title. By age, like prisoners age 65 or older were less likely than all others or whatever to have met the threshold for SPD. Like that would just ground me into what I'm looking at versus having to commit to reading all these bullets to interpret. Sure.
Absolutely. So I'm a big fan of that. So you could use the title just to say, rather than saying this chart is showing it by age,
right,
and not going beyond that, but actually kind of using it to explain the what is the like analysis
why did you
telling
label?
you.
Yeah,
because she does say it here. It's like, so I mean, she could even take that first bullet and use that as a title.
Yeah, I think that would be effective.
Yeah. All right.
But overall, yeah, it's really nice fizz. And
yeah, it is. I recall she was one of the first people to submit as well. So she did this really quickly after we announced the topic.
It's one of the first ones we've seen that's more horizontal.
Yeah,
like wider.
Which is quite rare to see.
Yeah.
Okay, next up we have the collaboration between Fred and Fred.
Yeah. That was so fantastic.
So we have another plum pudding.
Yes. Counted how many there were.
I do love the overall design of this. It's really on brand for the story they're telling, and it can be quite difficult when using kind of textured backgrounds or different color backgrounds to make everything readable. But they've done a really great job here of using the right colors to make sure everything's clear.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm quite impressed with that. So, I mean, the story flows really well.
Yeah, we have.
The one thing I'd say is, I did mention this on Twitter. I think the left part of the Sankey labels are missing.
Oh.
So, and they admitted that was a mistake. So I was kind of like, oh, this is great, but what is this?
Yeah, they must be calling out something.
Yeah, so it's what they were jailed for. So acts intended to cause injury, for instance.
Right, but I wasn't clear why some of them are all white. If they're coming from different places, they were trying to. I think all the bottom ones must be some kind of minor offense.
I think they're calling out the biggest one. So the biggest one was 40%. This robbery is 30%.
Yeah, so I mean, even if you just labeled the top one, if that's part of the story, because I understand Sankeys are wicked hard to label because of these small, so it might have been impossible to label all of them. But and I think you can take liberties with not labeling everything. If the point of your story is I just want to call out this one part and that's the remainder of what they talk about, then just make sure that one's labeled so we know, what the key takeaway is.
Yeah. And then down here we've got we're comparing Aboriginal, or let me get the Torres Strait Islander people to to just Australian what we call them, non-Aboriginal people.
Yep.
And that's the white line, and it's always pretty much straight where it appears to be when looking in this view. So I was thinking, is this the right chart type for this analysis? I mean, I was thinking maybe a dot plot might work a little bit better, or because otherwise we just constantly got this white line that's. And I'm sure that then there's big numbers in here, because we're looking at it by the I think it's per 100 or 1,000.
Yeah, 100,000.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think, and I don't know if they're I mean, I'm gonna assume their analysis is correct, but it makes me question if they're looking at the per 1,000 is the total population in Victoria versus the total non-Aboriginal and Aboriginal population. I'm assuming it is. So, and if that's right, then I mean, I think I mean, it's flat, but that means
Well, that
this,
kind of, I guess it proves the point that they're trying to make as
exactly. I'm
well.
just like, that means this is huge.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, those are big numbers.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't know. Do you have another?
No, I was trying to think. I thought maybe, I think either way, if we're gonna show it in this way, we're gonna end up with a consistently flat kind of line,
Yeah.
whatever that may be.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not going to show you the trending over time for the other ones because of the scale and it's so small. I mean,
Yeah, so we can kind
you
of
have like
see like
bar charts or something, but I think that would get super busy.
yeah.
Mm.
And then the only other thing I was going to say was there's over here we've got they leave the prison in slightly better health. I don't know if that's the kind of right language to use, you know, when referring to people.
And it says discharge from jail. It says poor though. I'm confused. Right? It says that their
Yeah, true,
health is
actually, yeah.
poor. So I
But they don't leave the jail in better health because that bar's bigger.
yeah. I mean, they're less likely to leave in poor health. So I guess that's the point. I mean, you're trying to take kind of like this opposite approach. Like
Yeah,
not
so
many of them are leaving in poor health, but
I think this bar should be labeled the
right. Yeah.
excellent, yeah, not the the one where we're calling out people that leave in poor health.
Yeah, I agree because it's a little confusing.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, maybe that's the only only good part of this unfortunate story is they're leaving in better health, so that's good. But I don't know if I'd point out that very tiny bar.
Yeah. I think these charts, like the unit charts, are quite powerful in just showing like the difference between the two people. But what really struck me was the housing, because kind of like we've got all this information, but the real issue is housing. And then it's kind of a little bit underwhelming down here with no charts to kind of support that or anything.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, the last line, that could be the band that kind of gets to it. But it's like the last line. Like I would rather have that really stand out if you want to end on the note of insecure housing is what leads them to, commit these, crimes or, whatever it is, to kind of tie up the whole, like kind of go back through the viz and tie it together. But I would almost maybe call out that whole 73%.
Yeah, and I think that could be like the big like number to end on.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I really love it. I like the style, and it's different. Like it's not often we see a viz that looks like this.
Right, the theme and kind of that background. I think they did a good job of really driving home some of that emotional story because you're really connected now to the location of this data, and so I thought that was pretty powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
All
Good
right.
collab.
Yes, it's always good to see a collab. And next up we have Frederick again.
Right, he did
he did one on it's a similar topic.
Yep.
So this is looking at mental health specifically. So again, we're comparing the two groups of people. And he makes it flow really nicely, I think, over here. He's kind of got this narrative going on in the text, which is good. The one thing I was going to say was it feels a little bit cramped. Like I think he could, if it would be nice to stretch this section out a little bit and just give it more space to breathe.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think the top, I mean, we've got a ton of charts and bands in a very small area, and I almost feel a little overwhelmed in looking at it because there's just so much there. I'm actually not like sure where to look first and how to compare things. So it would be great to kind of maybe separate some of them into like a whole nother line of the same amount of space and just give it some extra room.
Yeah.
I also noticed this whole like green area chart on the left is actually a chart. So I was wondering what it was there for. That's like vertically, all the way to the left, that green area.
This. Okay. Oh, I completely missed that.
I did too. So I'm not sure it's working as well as intended. Because at first I was like, well, it's a funny little shape on the side. I don't know what that's supposed to be, but maybe we're zoomed in on Australia's coastline or something, I don't know. But I believe this is
It's a number of
going
inmates
up.
per year.
Yeah, and it's going up, but it doesn't look like it's going up because I'm looking at it from top down. So I almost thought it was going down. So I would just, maybe reconsider. We've seen some people do that in the middle to separate the colors, like the two sections. So, I mean, it could be a good little section to separate.
Yeah, you see it quite a lot sometimes at the top. So people use it like in the reverse fashion. So it comes down and it acts as like kind of like a little border.
Right.
But usually has something written in the middle. But because this is rotated, it's going to be more difficult to write something in here horizontally.
Yep.
But I missed that, so good spot.
Yeah.
And then we have this poem and artwork, which I think is really nice. But it feels like we could use some of this space up here to make this a little bit smaller.
Yeah, it takes up quite a lot of real estate in the viz. And I think he has some room that you could probably reduce the font, 1 or 2, and it'd still be legible. The colors are okay.
Yeah.
And it's not like if it got small, you wouldn't be able to see it. I know it's an impactful thing, and so you want people to certainly read it. I may consider thinking about putting that like almost as a border down the side, like like a margin. Like if you reduce the font enough that it took up like 1.5 inches or 2 inches of the side, and you made all your charts to the right, it almost forced people to read it down like a poem, and then also be able to subsequently read all the charts down on the like right side. I mean, that might be an interesting way to have them side by side versus it breaking up kind of the analysis, which I kind of feel is a little awkward. I'm looking at analysis, looking at charts, then I'm broken up by this poetry, which I really want to be impacted by. And then I'm going back to some charts. And so it just feels a little jagged in that regard.
Yeah. No, I agree. And then we have the section at the bottom about mental illness.
Yeah, it looks nice.
I mean, it's all labeled nicely and everything. I'd just say that again, I know this is a bugbear of mine with use of color. So we're using the green at the top, so we go back up. The green represents the Aboriginal people, and then down here the green is females and males. Not green is females.
Yeah, and I would say,
but it's labeled, so I guess it's okay. But it just to avoid any confusion.
Yeah, so I would actually say you don't need the colors at the bottom at all. I mean, you have the labels. There's no sense in adding extra color when it's really not necessary.
Yeah.
It's not used in some other place where you have to make that reference back to females being green and males being, this pale color. You could just get rid of the color down there entirely and just leave it in the bands, which I think is fine to like call out. And if that whole bottom was maybe like that light color, it would stand out pretty well. Yeah,
okay, well done, Fred. He's entered almost every single one so far.
That's fantastic.
So, and he's done 2 this month, so it's amazing. All right, next up we have Ginny, and Ginny is looking at medical trials or medical experiments on prisoners and patients.
Wow,
it's quite a heavy topic.
Yeah,
it's kind of freaked me out a bit when I was reading it.
Even though, oh my goodness. Okay, so I think this is a big timeline. Is that I hadn't really? Yeah,
so it's a timeline going down.
Okay.
There's not a great deal of data in here. It's more just what happened and when, with a few like key facts.
So okay, and some of these others are just kind of they're not really okay. The things on the left, the little droplets are kind of just some context.
Yeah, additional like information. Yeah.
Oh wow, there's Connecticut, Middletown, and Norwich. Yikes! It's like where I used to live. No.
So yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd say the color is like, quite like striking.
Yeah, I'd be curious why she picked, the green and the black. It always reminds me more of like UFO type stuff, like the scary.
Yeah. Oh, I was thinking like Halloween.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that kind of fits too,
Yeah,
right?
but yeah, I agree. Like UFO. Yeah. Um,
So I think the timeline, I know she probably did it vertically for some spatial space. But I think looking back to that earlier one by, and I'm going to forget who it was with the babies, the second one we looked at.
Amy.
Yeah. So that
Yeah.
timeline at the bottom, I think, that one was also very spaced. There was one far away and then a couple. And so I think you could do something a little similar to that, where you could have those annotations kind of call it out in a more of a horizontal fashion. And then all this other text, the supplemental text that really is driving the story, it seems like, as to, about all these experiments, could more be supporting text around that timeline. I mean, obviously I'd love to see some more, data that talks about, maybe how many people, or is there anything else that like is going on about this? Like maybe
Yeah. I mean,
group them by, like, is it about diseases? Were they doing experiments based on,
yeah. I mean, she mentions here that some were federally funded,
yeah,
and
like
then
that.
some people died. But I'd like to know kind of like numbers
Right.
around that.
Yeah, that would be
That's like
great.
kind of spiked my interest now. It's like, well, how many people died? You know.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. And I'd be curious now that I'm looking at it, like, so, what happened? Like 1973, it ended. So
but then
it looks like,
then we had some things going on in like
yeah.
Guantanamo Bay. Was it? I think I read somewhere, or Guatemala.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some other things, but they're not on the timeline.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So for this, I would consider color. I think the black background is a little much. I think a nice white background, and then have the particular dots for the years stand out a little more. I mean, the
Yeah.
text carries them, but it looks like there's a dot for every year. And I'd like to see that one, like, kind of really marked on that map, marked on that line a little better.
Yeah.
And,
We've got,
and
yeah. It's quite graphic kind of descriptions of what happened to the prisoners in the tooltip.
yeah. Even with this data set, I bet she could kind of, like I was saying, like maybe like group some things in so that you could have some additional data that is not just buried in the tooltip.
Yeah.
Group them by different disease types, or the goals of the study. I don't know where she found the data, but
Yeah. So she's got a little exclamation mark at the top.
Yeah, there's some
A
more
couple
out
of
there.
data
That'd be
sources.
cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm definitely interested I didn't know about this really, so
Yeah.
interesting topic.
Okay, cool.
Right.
Next one is Ingrid. I think Ingrid's on a roll. She's been doing some like amazing visits recently.
Yeah. This is another one that, has a muted color palette with just like the grays. Now yours is still.
Yeah. This is on medical co-pays in prison, which isn't something I was familiar with because this is not something we have in the UK. It's not something you need to worry about, thankfully. It's just not loading for me. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of some of Mira's work.
Like I was going to say that.
The colors and everything.
Sure.
That's not a negative thing.
No, that's a compliment.
Yeah.
Sure.
But again, I think she's done really well with the annotations, just to call out like what happened and when, which I really liked.
Yeah, no, I agree. And here's an example of like a really nice title that helps contextualize what you're looking at without having to read a whole paragraph. So she really just spells it out with what you're going to look at and what kind of occurred in the chart that you're going to then analyze.
Yeah.
So I think that's really great.
Yeah.
And
then that repeats all the way down. So she's going like this was the biggest in like this year, and then describing actually what the chart's showing in like smaller text, which I really like.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it doesn't look like the two that are next to each other have synchronized axes, but I'm noticing the one like looks like it's fixed like closer to 150, but I'm not sure why, because it doesn't go that high.
Yeah.
If you're going to fix it, I would just have them be fixed at the same point so that you can really see that difference.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
agreed.
don't fix them and make sure it's noted that like the axes are different. But yeah, so it just looks like that may have been just an oversight when building it and
Yeah.
given the same axes.
And then she's got the square chart at the bottom. I think we had a conversation on Twitter about somebody changing it to a hex map or getting them to align a little bit nicer. Was that for this viz?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know. I think, well, we saw it earlier with Amandeep. So his viz had all the squares lined up more in like a grid, like on top of each other.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about some of that spacing. So I think that was what I was referencing, because this felt a little awkward. Like I think the row column data set that she's using here is based on using a hex map, because then the hexes fit together.
Yeah.
So Brittany Fong, I know, had put out a while back, someone had said like she had the data set that was kind of the other way, where every other row was just kind of like moved over a half a point, and then they all line up. And so I think it would just really clean this one up ever so slightly.
I agree. Yeah.
A little touch. I mean, really, it's still effective by all means.
Yeah. I mean, they're all in the same right position, but yeah, I think that might just be that nice touch just to get them to align nicer.
Yep.
And you can see clearly, which state stands out. So is it Nevada?
Wisconsin. I'll help you out there.
I'm not that bad.
Yeah.
I'm getting better. But yeah, it's fascinating data. And I think Ingrid does a really good job of like telling the story really well.
Yeah, I like the copay thing. I think this is one of the data sets that we may have found.
Yeah.
Which is just interesting, like how much like they actually earn, and then what their copays actually are. I mean, it's like they don't have.
Yeah, and then the impact on their health as a result.
Yeah, exactly.
That I'd say maybe this section could do with just a little bit more space. It seems like some of the elements are a little bit close together. She looks like she's using like a slightly different kind of font color. And it's a little bit bigger as like a header, but it's quite a subtle difference between like the body and the actual headers. So
yeah, and right, so some of our titles look like they're in that kind of bluish gray, and then the text is in black.
Yeah
the only problem I have with that is it almost makes the text stand out more than the title. So usually like when I create vids, like I'll have the title be the darker gray or black, and then any subtitles are a slightly lighter shade. And so this feels a little backwards, where then the titles blend into the text. The size is also the same. So when you scroll up right above the map, text and the header for the map or the title for the map are the same size.
This one looks slightly, they look slightly bigger to me, but maybe that's just because of the coloring, or maybe it's in bold.
If they are, it's
maybe
not
bolded.
Yeah, you may be right.
Yeah, it's very subtle.
Yeah. So spacing would help too. Just a little more gap there. So you're reading a title and not continuing on into another paragraph. That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like how she's included these kind of little call outs as well. And they align back to her original title, like in terms of the design.
I think
it's like a nice touch.
That's really nice. Really clean, clear story. Awesome.
Next up we have Jagrithi. Is that how you say it?
Your guess is as good as mine, but
I hope so.
That sounded pretty good.
So again, this is looking at mental health in prisons.
Yep. So, so my first thought here was, we've talked a bit about this regarding, some colors and things. I'm not sure that this background is, looks a lot greener on my screen than it does on your screen.
Like yellow on mine. Yeah.
It's very like neon-y, yellowy green. It doesn't complement the colors real well. So, I go back and forth on like background colors. So I'm not saying background colors are bad. I just think this one doesn't really fit, doesn't feel like it fits very well with these purples and blues. So I'm noticing the background more than the charts themselves. So, I may reconsider that.
Again, we have this chart none of the charts have a title, in fact. So it takes a second to kind of figure out what these are showing. And then the charts over here, I don't even know what you would call them, like officially. like a,
You know,
so we're looking at the split of prisoners and how they break down. So like gender, like education.
the problem is they're not actually breaking it down by size. So it's splitting it out into the categories, but the size isn't there. So I think this chart, it almost like it had a good purpose to like say, hey, we're going to take everybody and this is how we break it out, kind of like this network.
But it doesn't.
But it doesn't. It's not really doing what I think it's intended.
Yeah, and in fact, each strand is the same size.
Exactly.
Regardless of, I mean, even if they ended it at a different point, then we could see the difference more clearly. But I think just a bar chart.
A bar chart would be perfect. You know,
well, 4 bar
say
charts.
if you really wanted to use this technique, I would rotate it sideways and put the bar chart on the end, similar to like what Brian did. Like he only used it to connect things together, that, you know, sigmoid kind of network, whatever you want to call it. And then there's the bar chart at the end that actually shows the values, so you can do some comparisons. Now, you know, if this were to really split out, which I don't believe the data set did, but if it went from male and then it split out male into the 4 categories and those had a size and the 4, you know, but we're not doing that. So we're not segmenting each of these into their lowest level of granularity, because I think the data was just at this level. So yeah, I think probably just go with a bar chart, and that would be much more effective.
Yeah. Okay. So. All right. We're just over halfway.
Yeah. Okay.
Next up, we have.
We're really liking these visits and talking about them, so
we could be here all day.
We'll be faster. Okay.
We do this every single time, like just get bogged down on a few and end up talking about them for ages. But, okay. So next up, we have one by, I think it's Jan. I think you might say it, but we had a conversation with him on Twitter about this, right? So he originally had a radial bar kind of thing instead of this bar chart here,
and a very big image, and like there was some other
and he's
color
got, so he's got the two there was an image at the top right, wasn't there, that was quite hard to see, I think. And he's also got the 2 visits, so he's got the light background and the dark background. So I think they're the same, it's just the background that's different. Yeah,
I like the light background, it's easier to
read. Me too.
I'll say, like, his iteration already on this was really nice. You know, he took that feedback and I think it looked better now. It's easier to read. The picture was taking up a lot of real estate. It was a little blurry and there were some inconsistencies in some colors. So I can tell that, you know, he's changed that up and made sure that those elements are a little clearer. You know, I think I just say, like, he uses bar charts, and I think that's fantastic. This is the best way to visualize this information. I can get a lot of understanding out of the rates of these different populations across prisoners and jail inmates. So I think that's effective. I don't think there was a need, you know, for that radial bar, which was just confusing. So this is a good way to show this data.
Yeah, what he's doing as well is he's got this kind of the red encasing, so the red represents the jail inmates. So we can, rather than showing like a bar for each like he's doing here in these charts, he's splitting it out so we can see the proportion of prisoners versus jail inmates, which I think is really nice.
Yeah, and that's really effective for like spacing, right? He's got a lot of categories here to look at, and so now we can kind of collapse it into, you know, a chart that's half the size, and it, you know, it still works. So
yeah, and then we've got, so this, I mean, this is effectively like 3 charts, but he's got the highlight so we can split it out and just show each section, which I thought was quite a nice addition.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, because a lot of folks had put them all together, because in the data set, you know, I think there might be a hierarchy, you know, one other thing we could separate out further, but, you know, so this is more helpful to say, like, hey, these are 2 of these go together, 4 of these go together, you know, these 6 go together. They're not all part of the same whole that we're looking at.
Yeah, and I think that was the problem with the last chart, right?
Yeah.
A little bit kind of too much going on, and it was quite demanding of your attention, but now it kind of, that this chart just blends in really nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. All right, next we have Johan.
Yep.
So this is a similar story to some of the ones we've seen before, but the impact on children when parents are incarcerated.
So I was looking at this before we got on the call, and, you know, one of the things that stood out is she only has, there's like 2 right? There's like two main charts.
Mm-hmm.
But there was all this like information packed in these tooltips over, I mean, not two main charts, like the number of bands are actually, she might, you know, she's got all these tooltips in here,
Yeah.
which I was like, wow, that's, you know, I love finding little nuggets sometimes of like information and tooltips, especially if it's not required for me to understand the viz, right? Like, so I can read this and get the information I need that she's trying to convey, but it's nice to be like, oh, I want to, now I can read this if I want to, but I wasn't overwhelmed by all this text necessarily, right? So
yeah, no, it's
you
a really
know,
great way of, you know, keeping a pretty simple design,
yeah,
and then adding all that additional information.
right. So I thought that was cool. And I think she did a really good job with the little icons. They're all of a similar look and feel with the colors. That's
Yeah,
really effective. That's a good way to use icons. I liked that.
yeah.
Uh,
And she's kept I like how she's kept this like custom font and used it
mhm.
throughout to call out the bands. I always like to see that.
Yeah, you know, it feels like a nice little, I think you always have to be careful with custom fonts, but this, when she's talking about children, it felt like a little bit like a crayon, even though it's also like tough. And so there's this
Yeah,
whole dichotomy of feeling like you're, you know, this whole jail and these little kids. And so it had a little bit of an emotional pull to it, which I thought was effective given the topic. So I
yeah.
think it was great. Yeah.
And good use of color as well. She's just got like the 3
Yeah,
colors.
definitely.
Yeah,
Love
or
it.
2. Yeah.
And she's got enough space and breathing room between each of the elements. I thought was pretty good. I mean, maybe a little bit could be between the 2.7 and the chart above, but like there's a
Yeah.
lot of nice space.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
And the bands are nice and big, which
yeah,
is what I like to see.
no, they're great. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was great.
they're well done. All right, next we have Kate.
Yeah, and she had done this is the second iteration, at least that she did on this as well, because you had some feedback on.
I know you gave us some feedback already on this,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, it had a lot of colors before, and there was
Yeah.
some fonts that were really like spray painty, drippy, and reminded me of some
Uh,
gruesome stuff. So
yeah, the
I
title, right? It
appreciate
was
the edits
she had like
because
the dripping kind of like,
yeah,
it was supposed to be paint, but it looked like blood. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. I remember.
So I think this looks a lot better and still got her use of a nice custom font, you know.
Yeah, I do really like the overall style of this, like the kind of the graffiti and the textured background and
Yep.
everything. I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah,
And
this is
again,
definitely a different style than some of the others. It's kind of a little more infographic-y and playful, lots of different colors and fonts and different techniques. But,
yeah,
you know, it hangs together. I mean, the whole, you know, thing fits like from start to finish with all
yeah,
the
she's used like those stars or like or scribbles, whatever you want to call them,
different.
consistently, like, which is nice. And then the same font as well, which we both know how difficult that is in Tableau, right? When you want to use that kind of custom font and you have to like build it all in PowerPoint.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Kate's great at this anyway.
Yeah, and I think
But
she used a lot of nice bands. She like interplays that with some charts. So like I said, I think, you know, she's got that bar chart right there is like just perfect. I like the text at the end and good use of the labeling
yeah,
instead of putting it in the header so that you have some space with these long titles. That's a really good use. And making enough space to do that. I think that looks fantastic.
yeah, good use of icons as well, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they all look pretty consistent, and just help kind of, you know, bring that story to life without overcrowding it with text and just keeping that reader's interest there.
And you know, Kate
Really
did something
good.
different than some of the others where like she uses a lot of color, but they're all like for each section is a different color. So
Yeah,
it helps me be oriented to each section, and it's not like she's using purple again later or green somewhere. Like it's not all mixed and mashed. So that I think that's helpful.
yeah, it is clear where one section ends and one begins.
Yeah.
Like I was cutting the pictures out for the blog post, so
Mm-hmm.
for the really long form ones I have to break it down, so like Brian's I had to break down into sections,
Yeah.
and this one as well, but both of them were really easy because I could say, okay, this section like starts and ends
Yep.
like here, so I'll cut it here. And I think both of them I've split into 3 because they're so big. But yeah, no, it works really well. And she's at the end, she's got these buttons which I think are really cool, so you can, you know, there's a call to action, and then you can go and find like more data, and which is a nice touch.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
It's a good story. Well,
okay.
I mean, it's not a good story, but she did a
Yeah.
good job telling the story, you know what I mean?
Yeah, next up we have Mariana.
All right.
And I think she's iterated as well. So I think someone gave her some feedback and she changed it completely. I think originally they had a light background, I recall, and she changed the design anyway.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's see. So this is common health problems.
Yeah. So we start off by looking at mental health. I mean, this is the chart that Jan originally had, right? There's something similar. I just find, I mean, they look good, but I find them really difficult to read.
Yeah, and
it's that balance again. It's like,
Yeah, and this is, nothing against anyone who uses it. I mean, but they're probably one of my most despised charts. And part of it is because, I think actually Kevin mentioned this in your guys' talk, but when you're talking about circumference, well, I think he might have been talking about, no, you guys did. The circumference of these makes the one on the outside extraordinarily longer than it actually is compared to the others, right? So
so the prisoners
the
in this case
is you're further away, and so your circumference is longer, even though, and so it over exaggerates some of these values from a visual perspective. So I just have a very hard time with using them now. Yes, I can see maybe which ones are bigger, but that may not actually be accurate. I mean, it's
and then on this one, I think so. We've got it's two separate charts, right? So we've got the radial part and then the bars, and they're ever so slightly like misaligned.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just a standard bar chart would be just perfect. I mean,
yeah.
And if you didn't want to do that, I mean, even a dot strip and having them all on a strip and just so you could see the distribution of the differences, but a bar chart would be great. And I like that she's changed the colors where the bottom two are talking about parts of the general population and the other three are this, lighter, the whitish color.
Yeah.
So I think that part is really effective. I like how she has the label right on the bar. If you just got rid of that radial part and made those lines, she's got actual bars of the values. That's what she has going on. I mean,
that would be fine.
Really great. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and there's a couple of spelling mistakes on mental, like just to point that out. So then we've got the charts here, so looking at it by age.
So what is this? Because
I'm a little bit confused about the different sections. Is this gender? There's no tooltip.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess, but I don't know for sure. And so I'm
not. Sure. No, sorry, it's not. It's prison and jail.
Oh, got it. That's right. Okay. So that's
a tooltip would be good, I think. I mean, yeah. What my confusion is here is the label that you see in the white section refers to the blue section.
Yep. It's like so now I'm looking at it. It's inverted, which I don't particularly like here. Because I was looking for my bottom axes and realizing it's on the top. And that's why I was like, why are yeah. Okay. Right, so I would just make it a standard stacked bar if you wanted to do stacked.
Yeah.
The right way, like right side up.
Yeah. I mean, even if we just had the axes line, and this is something that me and Kevin spoke about in the last call, where we have these almost like floating kind of charts, which don't have any grounding. But if we had a line going across here, we'd see instantly, okay, that's where it starts. Because I think these age brackets could easily be confused for like labels, and then you're kind of lost as to which end is the right end, right?
Yeah, I agree. Otherwise, it reminds me of like a survey where you have things in a particular axis and things go above and below, like a center line, and that's what I was looking at. But then I realized the center is not centered, so I think it would having the axes line and just making it bar chart that goes from bottom to top. And to be honest, you're talking about not being sure of if it's prison or jail. So I did see that little section, but it's so tiny to the right up there. Yeah. So I think somewhere else, if we're going to call out those colors, I don't want people to miss it, right? So that if that's throughout the rest, that we're really aware of it. And if it's not, I would just restate it in this chart.
Yeah, another thing here is that we've got both colors on both circles. So we've got,
That's really true. Yeah.
is it the center or is it the line?
I'm not
I
sure.
imagine it's the
Maybe.
center because that's the bigger, but again, it's just be careful with things
Yep.
like that. And also, I'm not sure why, but the so we've got 30 and 23% here, but the bigger numbers over here are actually smaller circles.
Yeah, and the circles don't seem to be encoding value because they're all, I mean, the 2 and the 1 are the same, the
Yeah,
same, and the same. So that could just be the sizing of the chart if it's floating.
yeah.
Um, so
Now I
we can
think,
consider that.
yeah, and so I think with back to the color again, it looks like the colors change. So like down
Mhm.
here, we've got I think this is the different
It's male. Okay,
this
it's male and female.
and then the jail and the prison,
Yeah.
but it's a little bit confusing.
So this is a place too where she has actually male and females at the bottom as a header. So this is more like in your column, and
Yep.
then you're just using points instead of a bar chart. And so a side by side bar chart would be more effective. I think you wouldn't have to put the color on. Well, you don't have to have color on female or male anyway because they're lined up.
Yeah.
The problem is it's not very obvious because there isn't kind of those, like you say, kind of the axes lines to kind of ground the chart.
Yeah.
So I almost missed the female male headers because they were floating in space. And I wasn't sure which way I was reading this chart. Was it horizontally or vertically? So
Yeah. And
I
then
think grounding elements would be helpful, like formatting kind of.
yeah, and then again, it's like back up here. These colors are even smaller down here.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, and we've got the 2 colors for each, but it's not immediately clear,
Right.
which one's which.
I mean, this section is nice with like some spacing. She's got some nice little paragraphs. I'd resize all the icons to be of a similar size. Some look a little smaller, but
Yeah.
overall, this is a good separating section, and it seems to pose some questions and provide some answers. So that's great from a text perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like how she's used different background colors for each section, so it's kind of broken out and it's clear like when one section ends, another one begins.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the text is easy to read against all of them as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And then we have this like diagram down here. I wouldn't call this a chart and such.
Yeah.
Just to show that kind of like stages.
The 4 steps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm sure this is kind of like a custom chart just to create this cyclical, steps to improve the healthcare.
Yeah.
I've done that before. We kind of just make just so you're using data instead of an image. So I think that's always very creative. People try to do that.
Yeah, I did something similar this time just to, not to use up too much space, but make something that looks more exciting than just like a list, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good, and it's clear what each section means. It's all like everything's clearly labeled nicely, and she's even managed to put in like a transparent image, which is like really subtle.
Yep.
As well.
I would just make it a little more square because I'm just it's too obvious. It looks more like an oval, but
yeah,
pretty minor.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, well done.
Cool.
Okay. Next up we have, I think his name's Matty. Matthews.
Oh yeah, this was a cool one.
Yeah. This one is looking at prison overcrowding.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of Kate's with that kind of like the graffiti font.
Yeah.
But I really like it. He's got like the brick background as well, which is just really
cool. Yep. But to note that it's just used right there. So I think it's effective in the title and the bands,
but then we lose it.
And I'm glad that we lose it because it's just good to draw you in and be like, what's this about? This is an interesting title. If it were anywhere else, it'd be like very challenging to read. So
yeah,
that was just enough, and that was good. Yeah. So it looks like we've got some echo.
Yeah.
Going on here. And so we're looking at incarceration rate, number of people in prison per 1,000. Okay. So he's doing incarceration rate, and then what are we along the sides that overall population or something?
Prison population.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so we can see like in Asia,
Big population,
big
obviously, but
yeah.
the rate, yeah. So I think this is an effective use of that.
I mean, they're always a challenge, these kind of
Totally.
charts, but it works, I think, and it's, you know, everything's labeled clearly.
Yeah, and so he does a good. I mean, so this I was looking at this, and it's interesting because one of the biggest challenges with these is certainly labeling.
Yeah,
And I mean, granted, luckily, there's just you start off with these big areas in countries or continents rather, and so
yeah,
that's kind of helpful to just start at that level, and he can get all the labels in. The bottom part, I think, is good for the detail. Obviously, you can't label it all, but it allows you kind of to look into how everything breaks down.
yeah, and at least we can see the biggest countries in each region
Yeah,
as well, which I think is fine. And if you need to know any more, you can hover
exactly.
over.
It's not meant to show all this, so I think it works. And
Yeah,
the colors stand out well against this dark background. I kind of like the white border part of it. It kind of flows with the bricks from the top. It feels very like cohesive of
mm-hmm.
the white border and the black background, kind of like that bricky
Yeah,
thing, and flows that throughout. So I mean, he's been consistent in that design, which I think is cool.
yeah, it's good. And then he continues on the consistent design.
Yep.
Over here, we're looking at overcrowding and where we see the most overcrowding.
Yeah. Wow. Look at
Yeah,
that. Caribbean 248%.
it's crazy. I mean, in the UK, most of the prisons are at 100%, if not higher. So it's,
Yeah.
and they're cutting staff, so it's no wonder.
And they're doing better than everybody else. Look at this.
I know, and I thought it was bad.
Uh,
Yeah.
and what's down here?
So we've
So
got a couple of charts here. So we've got the scatter plot, which is looking at, I think it's prisoners versus occupancy.
yeah, so I think here we're having kind of this awkward marginal histogram. You know what I mean? Like these two
Yeah.
parts are the parts of the scatter plot, I believe. Is that
Yeah, so he's calling out so this, it's like where the bulk of the distribution is, right? So
yeah.
most of them are in this like middle section.
Yep. Yeah. So that's interesting. Just to do it on a scatter plot, partly because the top part is not. I don't know that.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
They don't
okay.
line up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah. I get what you mean. I missed this bit.
it's technically a separate chart. I think maybe a little more space between them might help.
I don't think it is, because this is, so Haiti's in the Caribbean, Bolivia's in South America.
Yeah, but the U.S. is all the way. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, maybe you're right. Yeah.
And then I think this cluster down here is Europe.
No, you're right. That's not. Yeah,
But it's
okay.
not
So,
obvious.
yeah, it is like a marginal histogram, but
Yeah. Do you know what would help? It just acts
lines.
like lines. He's got them going across horizontally, but because we haven't got them here, I almost thought that this was a section in itself, and then that line kind of separated it off.
I think the lines would help. Even like super faint would just help kind of orient that these all go together. Yeah, now that I see it, that it really is that way. That makes sense.
It's really cool.
Yeah, no, totally. I like it. That would have just helped.
I like what he's done with the shading of the circle. So you've got some transparency there, so you can see where they overlap. But it looks like the smaller ones are behind the bigger ones.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know.
Some places they are and some they're not, because in Asia they look like they're on top, but in South America they're behind. So I don't know how that happened, but you're right. It's some of them. Yeah, I don't know. You should just check on that and make sure you can get all of them. Definitely. Nice. That's cool.
And then down here we've got the map's not fixed for one. So
yeah, I just saw that.
I've just messed up. I'm not a fan of squares on maps. I don't know about you. Something about it just doesn't feel right. I don't know. I think circles work better, and I think that if he used circles, they'd tie into his overall design better, because we've got obviously the scatter up here. We've got the dots here as well.
Yeah, unless he was going for that square brick thing. He's got a lot of squares too.
Maybe, yeah.
You're right. I mean, I don't have a particular problem with squares versus circles. I'm not a huge fan of these kinds of maps anyway, because I find it tough to really interpret. Like
the problem you've got is that some of the countries have got a small land mass, and
exactly, and it's kind of hard.
Looks like in the Caribbean, you've got some countries here that have got high occupancy, but they're so small.
Exactly.
Small islands.
So, yeah, I just. You know,
if it was me, I would make the map the same color as the background. So I think he's using the satellite map, isn't he? But it would blend in a little bit better if you just had like a very subtle map.
mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
with the sea is the same color as this gray.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, overall, it's great. I think it's a good design. It's got some good chart types. Definitely drives that point home about overcrowding. So, you know, I think he's done a good job there.
Yeah, and he brings the bricks back at the end, which is nice.
Oh yeah, at the very
it's very
bottom.
subtle. Yeah,
that was good.
Yeah.
A little
Okay.
buffering.
All right.
A couple more.
Next we have Mira.
Well, we all know Mira's design. She is like in a powerhouse of like getting her style together, which is so cool to see develop over the last year or so.
She's been amazing, and it's Mira's straight away.
Yeah, definitely.
But I would say she's used a different font in this one. So normally she always has the same font.
She's been switching it up. There's been a couple that I'm like, what font is this? Now I'm like, she's to produce like a viz of like the Mira fonts. Like
this one is
almost I've never seen before. So
I know, and they always look so good.
Yeah.
This one's almost like a stencil kind of font. You know, you've got the little like lines that are breaking it up.
Yep. And she's looking at a very specific, Brazilian prisons, which I thought was interesting. Like,
it's interesting. Yeah. So I think Mira always does a good job of making things like pop, rather than just showing numbers, she'll show like little diagrams like she's doing over here.
Yeah.
And her visits flow really well.
She uses bands very well. I think that's another thing that she always has these big call outs with the subtitle or the actual dimension, what have you, smaller. And I think, really does a good job of making sure those numbers are popping and people are reading those, and that difference between the font size is dramatic enough,
Yeah.
So I love that.
She always uses the bars, like the 100% kind of bars, and
I love them
as well.
Yeah. I think they're really effective.
I mean, this one is good because if you didn't have that, these kind of tiny sections would just be a little bit lost, and
right. Yep. You barely see them. No, I think those are really great. I just refreshed. And so this, okay, so we're just looking at tuberculosis. So it's cool. Like, she's calling through like all this. We're talking with Brazilian prisons. You get a whole sense of the whole population. She breaks it down by male, female, you get a little more context. And then she goes into, just to one location, right?
And then just one disease as well.
One disease, right? Tuberculosis, and kind of going from there. So I think that's a really nice way of doing some storytelling. I've done that before too. We kind of start high and like drill into a very specific part of the data and focus on it, because there's so many times we have like big data sets and you can't tell every story in it. So do one story really well. And I think she's really done a good job of that here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Well done, Mira.
Yep.
All right. Next we have Michelle. She's another one that
might have been like the first one that was done. I mean,
she's Michelle. I know she's like really like she hasn't got much time, and she tries to get these done in like little pockets of time that she does have. So,
well, she does a good job at if she does these fast.
She does. I think.
Because
I think she was happy this month because she didn't have to do Iron Quest and Project Health Fits. So it gave her more time back. So she was grateful for that.
So I like, so this is her beginning, like starts with some of the things we've talked about.
Like with Fred's bits. Yeah.
With the hex map, and then that whole like line chart that breaks up your two sections. Like,
cool. She's used this really, really well. Yeah.
And like that annotation, that's really helpful to make sure that people know it's a chart, right? Like, you could just think it's some maybe you're not aware that it's a chart. And so by putting in some annotation, she has just the beginning year and the end year. At least you're like, you don't have a whole axis, but I can tell it's an axis. Like I see those two values, and the annotations really help me understand why this chart is a chart and why it's important that I look at it versus some of the others where we saw that didn't have axes and didn't have like a purpose as much. Yeah. Good job there.
Do you have the lines on yours here? I think this is a Tableau Public thing.
I don't. I've seen it on all of many of your area charts. mine.
Yeah, it's just annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love marginal histograms.
Yeah, this
I
is
use
great.
one in mine, and this one works really well. She's done a good job of not double encoding the bars on the ends, which is quite a lot of. And you can see she's just highlighting with the labels, just the min and max, which works really well.
Oh yeah. I think that's helpful just to
Yeah.
like ground you to that range without having like a legend.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good way to show it.
Yeah.
And putting all those little bands around it just gives you some context too.
Yeah. No, it's really great.
Excuse me. And as with a lot of these, we have the same concept of just some simple colors. I think it's a really good takeaway for all this.
And then here she's adding in the black again, but it's quite powerful to show, how people that have no mental health problems versus other people that do.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's like a perfect way to call out a part of her viz. So
yeah.
And then
she's done really well, just like she said before, like wrapping the text around and adding some bands for context like throughout, so you've got that consistently on each
and this is
section.
actually the first place I've noticed that so she actually changed the colors of the headers to be orange and the text. So there's not, Tableau is going to default to that gray and the grayish black. So to put all of this,
it's all in orange.
Scheme, yep, make it all kind of really fit together.
Yeah. Even the lines and everything.
Yeah, that's what I mean. There's a lot of attention to detail here with the format. Make it fit. So this one, what do we have on size here? Is this?
It's the percentage of.
So it's kind of the same as what's on the.
It's the same because the higher you're up, the bigger the circle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Because the axis is not. Wait a second. What's the bottom? Oh, the bottom says random. So she hid the wrong axes.
Yes.
So that's what. Okay. So the other axis is the one we want.
Yeah, we've got the
so that we know what the height is actually going, what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
no, you're right. Good spot.
Let's fix that. Wrong axis hidden. But so I don't know that you need the size on the circle as well as the height, right? Like they're both encoding.
Yeah. And the color as well. We've got like triple encoding. Yeah.
Too much, Michelle. It does look like a fizzy drink. They're getting a little bigger as they get to the top of.
Do you have Lucozade in the US?
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the orange Lucozade, like the advertising.
No, I don't know what that is.
Oh, it's like an energy drink, but it's bright orange. You drink it when you're sick.
That's totally what it would look like. Yeah.
Like I guess it's a bit like Gatorade. It's probably the equivalent. Gatorade. Yeah, but it's orange. But yeah, no, I agree. It would be nice if they were all sized the same.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind the color as much. It probably is breaking it out a little more into kind of sections, right? Like I can see, I know that the two at the top are really big, but like I can tell they must be far enough out that they're more maroon or darker orange than the others. I think the size is probably if you were to get rid of one and not all of them, I would get rid of the size and just do color.
And she has got a highlight action on state, which is good.
Yeah. That's nice.
And that shows the labels as well. I'll be inclined to just add an annotation on these two, so Arizona and Connecticut, because this is quite significant. So like 54% of people in these states are another race, other than all the races that are listed, which is pretty much everything. All the big races.
That's a little strange.
Yeah.
You know what? Actually, so there's probably a good reason for that. And having just lived in Connecticut,
okay,
I'd be curious, but there's
I thought you were going to tell me why.
Well, no, I'm going to tell you a guess. I mean, I don't know that I'm right at all, but there's a number of casinos and there are some reservations of Native American population that run the casinos. Now, I don't know if that means that population is here in Connecticut or not. I'm curious if there's anything else that would make some other race, and it depends on how every state also classifies their races. Yeah. So that could be some of it too, is if there's a large population of, I don't know what else would fit, but
yeah, because she's got the main ones, but then you've got maybe they're mixed because there's no maybe they're mixed races. I don't know.
It'd be interesting to kind of know what's going on with those. But yeah. Cool. No, that's very good.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right. Couple, yeah, like what, 5 more?
Yeah. So we've got Mohit.
Quick. All right.
I think
Hey,
this has
this
been the
one,
longest call ever.
sorry. We're like doing a lot of detail here.
Right. So
This is great. I mean, I like how this color is like throughout. We've got like columns of the jail and prison. It's super clear to me.
mhm.
Helpful when I can just look down one section and not have to revert back to remembering the color, because sometimes I'll admit I'll forget like by the time I get to the bottom of the viz. So I like this.
Yeah.
By the time I get to the bottom, now at least I've like processed it a bit. So that's really cool.
Yeah. The only thing I'd change is just, like I've said to some other people as well, just add some bands. So we've got a lot of stuff going on here.
Yep.
I mean, like more than 50% of inmates had an indication
That
of
would,
a problem would be a nice band.
agree.
And we've got, and there's quite big numbers been shown with some weird, like you know, the weird like number formatting. I mean, sometimes when we show the big numbers, you know, that if you write them all out like millions, they can be really impactful. But I think that the formatting here is a little bit off.
I think we're adding an extra comma that's not there, but yeah. Well, at least, wrong spot.
It should be after. Yeah, they're in the wrong spot.
It should be 1 there and 2 in the other. Yeah. Wrong spot. But yeah, I think these chart types work really well. The colors work really well. Yeah, I agree with the bands. That would be nice to just add, just to call out some of those other things below that title.
Yeah.
The bottom chart's nice.
I like the chart at the bottom. Yeah, it's really clear. I love these. These are like my favorite chart type at the moment.
Yeah, I think they were super effective, and you got a lot in here, right? The only thing is, when I first looked at this, I had a hard time with what the columns were. They're in the title, and they're kind of like, the title's sort of like separated out funny to make sure you see it. But the orange,
you mean the sex and the age, these two, or going down?
Yeah, like one is about, right, like what are the columns?
Oh, right. I see. Okay. So jail, mental health.
And I don't even know if that's true, because I think jail is blue and orange is the jail versus, so I'm not sure what these columns are. I think one is population, the one is mental health and serious psychological distress percents. So
right.
That wasn't quite clear, and the orange in the title is a little misleading, because mental health isn't what's orange, it's jail inmates is what's orange. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you mean now. Yeah.
I would just have the title and then keep the headers back there. Like, let us see what this is. Like, one's population, mental health rate, I assume, and the SPD rate. And then, you can keep the title, but it doesn't have to have the orange in it.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, because otherwise it's not clear what it was just, I was confused at first when I saw it. But otherwise, yeah, I like the chart type for sure. Just needs some.
Yeah. All right, cool. Next we have Riddy. So she'd submitted yesterday. She got in just in time. It's like she knew.
So interesting. We're seeing a lot of like the orange and blues, I've noticed.
Yeah.
But I don't know why.
It's not, it wasn't in the data source, because it was just a data source, right? Didn't have any.
I don't know.
It's bizarre.
Just noticed a lot of that, but yeah.
I like this, how she split it into like 3 clear sections. And she's got like clear headers on each chart, and it's consistent design like throughout.
I'm not a fan of the middle with like the words changing colors.
Yeah.
I don't know, that is kind of, I'm like, wait, what's going on here?
I would just do a white white text would be fine, or gray to match the background.
Yeah, something that you could see it against both, but not have to switch colors. It's a little, I don't even know how that like, how did it do that? It's so bizarre. Yeah, but I don't know if I have much to say here. Yeah, let's see here. Percent of jail inmates. So I think at the top, those 2 charts I see that we're going like left with jail and right is prisoners, but that top chart doesn't. It's not percentage of jail inmates and prisoners, because it's about their type of health problem. Yeah,
so it's not. This isn't 100%. Oh,
I think
it is, but then these ones have no.
They don't have a title or like. So I would love to have maybe just a tiny little text below it. I don't know. I didn't know
Yeah,
what, I didn't know what you were looking at unless you looked at the tooltip.
I agree, because and then she's using the same colors,
Color.
so it's blue or like blank, let's say, down here. So
I would just label right under each of them, like the, SPD, the history, mental health, and the no indication, just under each of them, so you understand
yeah, agreed.
what
Because
they are, and then you can use it down, which is fine.
yeah. She
So
does label it at the very bottom, but then it's too far. When I'm looking at it here, I can't see that, you know.
And those bar charts without, I think, kind of similar, like that axis
Yeah.
is, I don't know, it's weird. It looks like a stepped line, but it's really a bar chart. I don't know why there's nothing at the very bottom.
Yeah.
You know,
It's like what we said a couple of times now to people.
So other than that, I like her clear headers, as we talked about, the colors, and
yeah,
if it's symmetrical, and symmetrical visualizations are very nice, right? Like I can look on both sides and expect the same information, the same chart, and there's nothing that's like confusing that I would see something different on the other side. So I think that.
Yeah, I mean, she's good. Every chart is labeled, which is great. The one thing that it doesn't have is any annotations or like insight other than the chart itself.
Yeah.
Which would be nice, like just to call out a couple of things.
Yeah, even like a section at the bottom to have some summary bands at the bottom to kind of frame it back up after you've read through this, to kind of summarize it for you.
Yeah.
This is a lot in a small space.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot done well in a small space, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well done. Next we have Simon. So this is looking at healthcare in prison. So he's done this really like crazy background with the lines, which I don't know if it works or not. I mean, normally I'd say, don't do this, but I think he might have got away with it. What do you reckon?
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's a lot. It's funny because it's not a lot in the sense that we've seen some others that are more colorful or something, and this is just gray.
Yeah.
But for some reason, maybe it's because it goes with different charts that I'm looking across, and then I'm getting distracted by also following the way I'm reading with the lines in the background and the charts, and then I keep looking at the lines in the background. So
yeah, and I'm trying to align the lines in the background, which obviously mean nothing.
I'm just not sure that it adds anything that's necessary, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't get like, so for some of the others we've seen, like may have given some kind of emotional feel to it, or
yeah, so like I think like Kate's as well. Like Kate's used the like the textured background, but I think it wasn't the lines, it was just a little bit of texture here and there. And I think it worked okay, but here
I think it's a little bit distracting. So I would just,
I'd like to see what it looked like without it.
Yeah.
And yeah. But yeah, he's what's good here is this really consistent use of the same font. But at the same time, that font is quite difficult to read because it's bold. It's especially where we've got the bigger like blocks of text.
Yeah, so I think we talked about, I think it's good to have one type of font, for your headers and stuff that stand out, and then for the stuff that you really need to be reading and take a little time to read would be better. Caps is very difficult for a lot of people to read. Caps in a font that's broken up like this is even more challenging.
Yeah.
So, you can get away with it, I think, for a title, but I would swap out some of that other, the other text that's longer to read with some regular title case font.
Like the body text, like this bit here.
Yeah, exactly.
And then keep these as they are.
Yep. Yeah.
And the story flows really well. In this viz, so like he breaks it down bit by bit, and like we said before, he's describing what's going on in the charts in the titles.
Yeah, super helpful.
Yeah,
and he's got some like click to read, but I don't know if it's working. No, nothing happened.
Where is that?
There's a little
oh yeah,
but did anything happen when you click on it?
Yeah, I get the report.
There's one above that didn't do it. I don't know. The one above.
Oh, the cufflinks.
That one.
Handcuffs.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, it doesn't work. Yeah.
Something there. But that's kind of cool to just have a little like these little Easter eggs around. Click to read.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, we got nice barbell charts. We like those. Those are, I think, effective for this to show those differences.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the adults is general population adults and the prisoners, right? And that's my guess.
I imagine so, yeah.
But I'm
I'd
sure
call
it
that
probably
out,
says
yeah.
more in the text. I just didn't read it all. So yeah, and I like the dot strip too. I think those are really great for a number. If you have like a couple things you can put in a small area instead of using a bunch of side by side bars, like, so that's really helpful to see that spread. That chart that you got shown right there. I think I like that.
Yeah, on both of these he's calling out that the color legend and what they mean, so it's super clear.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so it's the legend. That's nice. Cool stuff.
Okay, next we have Swati.
Oh yeah, this is nice too. Another plum pudding.
We should count them. Like so many.
Not even including ours. So
I know.
It takes the cake for this one. Yeah, so this one's really nice too.
Really nice design. It reminds me a lot of your work, with these little like titles, like you. I think in the cheetah vids, wasn't it?
I did. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Just like that. Yeah.
She's got loads of space, lots of white space,
like
so it's really easy to read. Again, she's using like 2 or 3 colors.
Definitely. And the bands are big. You know, she got the numbers. What's big with the text surrounding it. So again, I think that's very effective. We talked about.
I mean, these plum puddings work so well in this case.
Yeah, I mean, look at that, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. That was crazy numbers. Yeah, and she got some line charts, bar charts. They're effective. I like those.
The bands look a little bit misaligned here. It's because of the second row of text on the drug and alcohol.
Right, just format those to the top, or
just bring that down a bit. Or we have a grounded bar chart, which is good. It has a line.
That does look so much nicer just to have them like kind of all on the same line.
Yeah.
I would say in the chart up above, that bar chart to the right, the numbers are getting a little squished because we have the labels. I guess they must be on the inner end. You know, I would just put them on the end. I'm not sure why.
On the outside, yeah.
Yeah, they're just a little, those bottom ones are just squished up against the axis.
I would bring this chart down a tiny bit just so it's aligned with this one, with the axes labels as well.
Yeah. And then her other, you know, the bar and bar chart kind of thing. I think that's effective. So this is female versus male, and that's really interesting. I mean, that's pretty clear to be able to see where, you know, females are above. You know, the other alternative to that, because sometimes it can be a little tricky to see, you could also use like a reference line.
Yep.
So that you could have the female, that pink, just be the bar and have the line be the male. So it's even more clear without having the distracting of, I mean, they both work. I'm just thinking, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would be inclined to add some annotation here around maybe the tuberculosis, and what maybe the ones at the top of the tuberculosis, the ones that stand out, and just call that out. Nope.
Sorry. Ellen, shush. Say hi to everybody. Okay. Someone woke up. Yeah, no, this is nice. And I know she made some of her icons, which was super cool too.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And then she's got this good thing where I love to do, you know, hover over the icons to get more information.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's really good. And a call to action as well.
Yeah. And she did it. It's really nice at the end there with.
And you can donate. Yeah. All right. Last one is Tyler.
No, I hadn't seen this one before. Shh, for heaven's sakes, Billy.
So this is interesting. It's a different topic to what anyone else has done.
Yeah.
This is foodborne disease outbreaks. U.S.
Oh, for God's sakes.
Hungry.
No, it's my son just came home.
Oh, okay. Let's get this one done and then we're finished.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
So let's see here. So I don't know what number.
It's not immediately obvious, you know, what these are about. Like, I don't know what number 3 is.
Right. Yeah, that's why I just saw that. I'm like, I'm also noticing, so what's interesting is it's over the course of all these years, right? So in context, so it starts with all this, but I don't have context, and this is everything. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like a lot. 200 over the course of, whatever it is, 20 years or what have you. But so it would be interesting to see that maybe over time a little better. So is it that, our
like
recordings
a line chart would be
yeah,
like nice if we got the time series as well.
So yeah, and there's only 5 deaths, which is great if that's all there is. I mean, that you could probably just put in each year and just see when they were. But
yeah, I mean, I personally wouldn't click through every single year, and
right, I'd be more inclined to click through if it was a line chart and say, do I want to look at outbreaks, whatever number 3 is, hospitalizations and deaths. Like that would be easier to have 4 choices than if I had to click through anything.
Yeah, totally.
I
think we definitely need to call out what number 3 is. I mean, I'm intrigued now, because he references it again here.
Oh, it's ill. It's ILL. It's just the it's the font. That's so
oh my god. Okay.
It's total.
Oh, I feel really silly now. It's like 9 o'clock where I live. All right, number ill. Well, I don't know what this is supposed to be. It reminds me of like
a thermometer.
Oh, okay. To me, it looked like a baseball bat.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a thermometer. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. I'd make these charts a little bit bigger. They look really squished. Like the bars are really small, and then there's a bit cut off at the bottom as well.
I see that. Yeah. And one's correctional and one's non-correctional institution. So it looks like the legend he's using at the bottom is cut off.
Yeah.
It says, but I would put whatever it is, you need to have that higher up so you can really tell.
Yeah. And then I'd increase the contrast between the two. They're quite like dark colors.
I agree. Yeah. And I don't think you need all those grid lines either.
No, you don't. No.
So I would kind of get rid of some of that. Be good. So, and we've got solutions at the bottom.
Yeah. Again, it would be nice if we had some like hover over like some context as well.
Or maybe just like a link to wherever, like, what is the FDA code?
Yeah.
I don't know. They look like they would be something because there's an icon there. I'd expect it to go to click and like go to a URL. But
yeah. But good use of color. I mean, it's consistent throughout. Okay. All right, we're done. Thank you so much. And it has been like the record like length, definitely. I know these take forever, but it's good. It's always good to see everyone's visits and actually appreciate them.
Yeah, and I just to say to everyone, I mean, thanks for submitting, for sharing your visualizations. I think there was such a like wide variety of topics and styles and analysis, right? Like that is what all this is about, and it's just it's mind blowing what people come up with and the variety. So kudos to everybody who did it and participated. And I'll say for me at least, I'm sure for you too, Sarah, like you learn so much also reviewing people's visits, as I think people then get from the feedback, because you start to really read through all this, all these consistencies and inconsistencies, and right, like I'm sure at this point you have some themes to talk about, that you've seen.
Yeah, so based on the themes that we've got from today, they'll be in the blog post. So like the 3 or 4 big things that we've seen. So I think one of the things is obviously the, anchoring your charts, which I actually think was a theme from last month as well.
Yeah.
But it's come up again in color, annotations and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm so appreciative of everyone that gets involved, and it's always a good learning experience, and everyone just blows me away with all of their work. It's incredible.
Well, thanks.
Thank you for collaborating. It was a lot of fun. Awesome. We should do it again sometime.
All right. Thanks, Sarah.
All right. Thank you. Take care. Bye.